On a surface level, the grimdark, twisted world of the 2017 horror game Little Nightmares is little more than a neat packaging for connoting an idea of childhood fear and terror. Navigating the levels as a downsized child, a perspective change on otherwise familiar environments, allows for an already threatening atmosphere to be applied tenfold, as something redundant as opening a door or reaching up to a table becomes both a challenge in itself and a potent stress factor under the pressure of everything being out to kill you. It's an easy and convenient way to make the ordinary alien, and reliably present challenges requiring unconventional problem solving through the level design. This use of scale is also absolute key in the constant sense of oppression within both the minute-to-minute mechanics and the overall narrative, where the player character feels especially helpless in how mundane everyday tasks become ordeals, while the towering adults of the story not only imply their intentions to destroy you on sight, but does so with the utmost ease. Oppression through scale is a highly effective way of creating fear and tension, and the way this is present throughout every fiber of Little Nightmares' being is the foundation for why its messaging works so well. Fear and disgust is what helps the player distance themselves from the grotesque creatures that populate the fictional world, with their twisted features, exaggerated behavior, and unconditionally malign nature, making them stand out as a clear other in contrast to the player. This massive rift between oppressor and oppressed is on one hand nigh comical, but also effective in furthering the thematic core of the game. Because while Little Nightmares may be marketed as a game about childhood fears and the dark side of nostalgia, its message is clearly one of the power structures around consumption, with the use of scale being fuel for the stark contrast within this system. Like, it's all there. The working title was Hunger. The entire game is set on a ship called the Maw, where the rich and wealthy eat in excess, while the poor and betrodden scavenge for food. These conditions are intently abused by the people in power to exploit the minorities, to not just work in their favor, but ultimately end up as the meat that is served on their plates. And the extreme conclusion within this enclosed system is the portrayal of the figurative poor eating themselves out of desperation before straight up eating the rich. While the conclusion is an exhilarating class indulgence, Little Nightmares is perhaps not the most deep and profound tale out there. The general power dynamic, while comprehensible and obviously powerful, is ultimately a bit one-dimensional. It presents no angle of responsibility or any real practical application for the player's own life. You might say its woeful wallowing in misery reaches no greater heights than pointing out that corrupt leaders and exploitation is bad, before giggling in the daydream of destroying said powers. And don't get us wrong, Little Nightmares is a good game, with its heart in the right place, spooky horror set pieces, fun puzzles, and what have you. But as a piece of societal critique, it's perhaps a bit tame. It certainly had a bit more to prove, so it's fortunate then that this was allowed to be expanded upon through an obscure concept known as a sequel. Little Nightmares 2 is pretty much the best kind of sequel. It furthers everything that was good about the previous game, while ironing out the kinks, and lets the new mechanics and narrative decisions blend seamlessly with its predecessor. The puzzles are more clever and interesting, the thrills are higher, the scares are spookier, and the emotional beats are more poignant. And to break off from the old game, you're now guiding two characters together through the dark, hostile world, taking inspiration from Ico with perfect execution. You can even hold hands. Cute. The feature-length escort mission is a game design concept often dreaded by players, but janky AI and cumbersome handling is averted here by basically making your companion as competent as you are, often actively helping you overcome obstacles and giving you hints if you're stuck. That is to say that the girl in the yellow raincoat, Six, is functionally valuable to the player, which makes losing her feel like a detriment rather than a relief. And this is a perfect foundation for then making the new dynamics in puzzle solving feel engaging, and most importantly, reinforces the emotional bond between these two characters. Making the protagonist from the first game into the companion character of the sequel is in all honesty simple but brilliant. You as the player probably already have some connection to Six from having played as her before. You know her and what she went through previously, making everything a bit more personal from square one. This in turn makes the paper bag wearing Mono perhaps even more of an audience stand-in, primarily through his obvious anonymity, but also in that we don't really know that much about him yet. This all makes events like finding Six locked up in a room so much more impactful on a meta level. Like, of course you're gonna get her out of there. Perhaps Six in general is the one element that connects these two games of the franchise together and makes them feel inherently interlinked. Both games touch on similar themes, but through fairly different angles, and in wildly different environments, so having a firm middle point between them is convenient. These two games may share a foundational critical view of societal inequality and disdain for corrupt ruling powers, but they contrast greatly in both specificity and conclusion. Mainly, Little Nightmares 2 presents how the power dynamics of the first game is executed throughout society, and that our complacency is part of furthering that. It dares to question us as individuals who operate within shades of grey, instead of placing opposing forces in clear black or white categories. Simply put, the process of cannibalism on a boat is extreme, but it probably doesn't hit as close to home as the portrayal of how society fails its citizens. The arguably more sensible angle is key to how the second game achieves its ultimately greater messaging, because it's likely gonna be more relatable. These ideas of societal struggles are immediately apparent through the chapters of the game. We go from those who have been directly neglected by society because of how they literally live outside of it, to the inhabitants of a city with ever-skewing towering buildings that reflect the people within. The institutional structures that are meant to help the population are failing to do so, and are instead working against them. The school is literally breaking down the fragile children to not only follow the rules, but also act in the best interest of them. There is no dormant revolution waiting for the beheading of the giraffe teacher. Instead, the very pupils she abuses are as determined to destroy the player as she is. Meanwhile, the hospital has completely lost its purpose, only functioning as a prison for containing and locking away broken people in pitch darkness with no intention of healing them. It's even run by some guy who's living in his own little upside-down world, doing whatever it is he does.
Have you ever tried to get something done in the healthcare system?
The school is in the process of breaking the children, while the hospital is taking care of what remains of the adults, putting them together piece by piece in a shoddy attempt of repairing them back to former glory, but failing miserably. To make this point even more clear, we see the scattered remains of people throughout the city, eerie traces of those who have just up and left, their very identity discarded. They're not here anymore. Some went out in misery, others with a bang. But either way, they all buckled under the immense pressure and hurt of the world they lived in. The parallels to the real world are not that hard to spot, especially when emphasized so poetically as they are in this game. Depression, alienation, and burnout are very common today, all the way from the classroom to the working floor. And as victims of this ourselves, we truly get what the game is going for. A lot of us probably feel broken as students, workers, or hell, neither. And even trying to get the help you need can feel like an impossible task. And after we break, it is assumed that it's just possible to fix us. We are expected to just go back to how we were before, even if we are unable to do so. And if this has never happened to you personally, you can probably still sense that there is something wrong with the world. And even if you can't put it into words, that knowledge can be enough of a burden to hurt a person. Where the first game pinpointed the inequality of wealth and power as the culprit of this wrong, the second game first shows us how this affects regular people like you and me, and then goes a bit further to identify how others cope with this reality. Throughout the game, environments will be laced with old destroyed television sets that subtly hint on the world building for the later half of the story. Of course, they're always relevant mainly through the main character Mono, every now and again stumbling upon an active set and being drawn towards it. It even gets to the point where he is sucked into the static world within and has to be pulled out by Six. So by the time of chapter 4, we're already so familiar with the power television has in this world that the prospect of entering a neighborhood where everyone is either slavishly watching it or desperately clamoring to do so feels completely in tune with everything else. Now, this visual motif of the brainwashed masses huddling over their television sets is a very old and often preachy trope that to a large extent has been absolutely done to death. Maybe to the point where sincere approaches to it will even come across as a punchline in itself. After all, foam bad is really just a super simplified criticism of the media consumption of the day that lumps everything into one homogeneous blob and proclaims that your dad is indeed very clever for not buying an iPhone. In that sense, you may even roll your eyes at Little Nightmares 2 for seemingly pulling out a boomer comic shorthand and telling you how cringe it is to be glued to the idiot box all the time, when you could be out playing with the other little balls and butt your head. But that's not really what Little Nightmares 2 is trying to say. In fact, we would argue that it would be in bad faith to read it in that way. For an apt comparison, take the game Mosaic from 2019. In many ways, these two games are strikingly similar in their thematics and conveyance, but it's the execution and conclusion that makes all the difference. Mosaic is enamored with the idea of brainwashed masses, walking in unison with eyes transfixed to phone screens, obsessed with the most black and white view of this world dynamic, where not only every breathing human lacks individuality, but that you are the only one that's truly real, the only one who's an actual person. By some magic, no one else is able to see between the massive cracks and realize that the world is a shit place without color or life. In fact, the fault of this lies in no one, just some external entity bent on controlling mankind, and after destroying it, everything is just fine and well. Because Mosaic in its naivety does not seem to believe that any of this is complicit. The world just happens to be shit, and the only thing required is one little independent glitch in the matrix for everything to be fine and dandy again. The main difference in approach between Mosaic and Little Nightmares 2 is nuance within this conveyed system. That access to comfort is an unequal luxury, the portrayal of negligence as a privilege. Without it, the population is reduced to pure desperation and vile anger. And within that dynamic, you are neither unique or magically resistant. Rather, you are as vulnerable to it as anyone else is. And that's not just the scarier approach, it's the honest one. It's easy to read the concept of people hypnotized by television screens as a commentary on the media, or at a grander level, entertainment in general. But we feel it's more fair to view it as escapism within a horrid world, to view excessive distraction as complicity and inaction. Yes, the anti-establishment angle works by interpreting it as the powers that be using their channels to distract the population from what's going on, but the more uncomfortable conclusion to make here is that of willful ignorance. The one question Mosaic was too cowardly to ask itself was if all the other people in its world also felt like unique individuals who suffered from their own problems. And through the way Little Nightmares 2 paints its world, it feels more certain that it wants us to ultimately understand that the complicit masses all view themselves as individuals who are the exception to the rule. That they're just following along because it's the easy thing to do. Being entertainment fiction itself, Little Nightmares 2 is of course not trying to claim that treating yourself to a little escapism now and again is a bad thing. When it uses televisions and enthralled viewers as figurative language, it's not necessarily just about screens and entertainment, but rather talks about losing sight of what is truly happening in the world, and the dangers of turning a blind eye to uncomfortable truths, of becoming a complicit actor in perpetuating the hurtful systems around you. It might be more comfortable to surrender to the idea that the world just is the way it is, and then ignore the horrors within it, because facing that reality simply hurts too much. Similar to how the citizens glued to the screens are trying to escape the world around them, so too are Mono and Six literally running away from something throughout the entire game. But you can't run forever, and eventually the world catches up to them. Mind you, they don't go down without a fight, and Mono's rebellious spirit and resolve to rescue Six leads him to go Akira and destroy the literal man. Yet, despite their efforts, it all ends up in futility anyway. We are merely given false hope before our protagonists end up just as lost as everyone else in the world. Six kidnapped into the television world and transformed into a twisted version of herself, exploited through her innermost desires. And Mono, trapped in the depths of the nightmare world, is forced to resign himself to his fate, growing up to become the very thing he tried so hard to escape. And this is the main fuel for our reading of Little Nightmares 2 as a social critique that places responsibility on the individual. At its core, this is a game about how idealism is snuffed out and dies. How we are susceptible to falling into the very same traps as everyone else, and that we perhaps should acknowledge the way our society to a large extent is run by downtrodden people who push down on the ones even more unfortunate. The idea that Mono, the player insert, becomes the scary media man allows us to also consider that all the other frightening characters in the narrative were themselves also exploited and corrupted to become what they are. That this realization allows us to then view these power structures as a system that perpetuates itself. No one is born evil. We simply learn to be nasty out of necessity or resignation. And yeah, you may see this downer ending as a surprisingly bleak message in contrast to how this second game in general is more uplifting and hopeful than the first one. But that distinction is also one of the points where the social commentary hits more close to home. Because this game is not really an escapist power fantasy, it's rather a reflection of our own society. That perhaps we have found ourselves in a state where hope is fleeting, and at the end of the day, there is no bright light at the end of the tunnel, just eternal darkness. And it's not a fun GameCube game. You don't write a story like this if you don't also believe it carries an inner truth. And in that sense, a happy conclusion may feel disingenuous in a world where one simply hasn't been reached yet. Rather, we need to take this reflection to heart and let it inform what we do from here on out, to at least attempt to disperse the darkness ourselves. Just like the television the people watch within the game, so too is Little Nightmares 2 probably displayed and experienced on a television screen. However, we don't suppose the story carries an anti-message, opting for the destruction of itself. Rather, we think of it as employing the conventional channels to bring its message across, to suggest that perhaps it's time to avert our eyes and face the consequences of the world. We don't want to speculate on minute details like why Six let go of Mono in a literal sense too much, because what we find to be most important here, and indeed the core of the narrative, is Mono falling into darkness after one last daring escape from the staring eyes of society, and how he then is consumed by their ever-present pressures and expectations. How he ages, loses the spark to fight back, and finally becomes that which he has been running from all along. It's a precautionary tale, written to set an example and emotionally contextualize both the fictional world and our own. What is important here is that we do not grow complacent to injustice, cruelty, and whatever horrible shit is going on in the world, because if we turn a blind eye to these things, we not only become complicit, but also serve the systems to just keep churning like nothing is actually wrong at all. And of course, we don't want that to happen. We don't want our world to reflect the grim horror realm of Little Nightmares, where inequality is so skewed that it's physically tangible. The horror portrayed in Little Nightmares may be exaggerated and distorted, but it stems from something very real that's happening all around. You just need to stop looking away to see it. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. This video was made possible by our lovely patrons, and they are Saifi, Salty Boy, C33, Whiskey Dono, Victoria Arcel Solis, Växelban, Tough Emily, Trucy, Trash Baby, Tommy Håkansson, Tobias Mattsson, Tegan Bread, TB Skyen, Sweet Pink, Starfighter, Shinksilla, Silly Rookie, Siddharth Madhasudan, Ro, Riley Rose, Raivokas Magma, Patrick H, Oscar Funes Galindo, Nishsvet, Nerdsync, Nate Kiernan, Mosling, Morgan, Miko, Mikael Ottens, Meowmix64, Melang Rubin, Meg Han, Max Miller, Matthias Graman, Margaret Krubiel, Mar B, Magnus, Marika, Losty, Lady Goggles, Karen Schulz, Just My Narratives, Jose Villarreal, Joel Nilsson, Jelly God, Isak Abrahamsson, I'm a Dumb Baby, Huang Wu, Gustav Granlund, Gothic Garfield, Goopy, Goblin, Gage McColgan, Frankie Teardrop, Florian David, Floofquist, Fling Flamberge, Emrasa, Emilulin, Ember, Eli Berg Mas, Dylan Robinson, Davy J. Bradley, Cult of the Hyena, Chloe, Charles Goldhaber, Casey Explosion, Baba Kenzie, Botch Frivarg, Biopanda, Billy Moran, Bibi the Bitch. Ben personally approves this message. Ben Clark, Basklin, Aaron Rain, Afayette, Anonymous, Andrew Jones, Andreas Aglander, Andreas, Anders Eklöf, and Chimeras, and Abigail Nail. If you also want your name to appear in our videos, then you can support us on Patreon, patreon.com/transparens. By doing so, you also get access to our really cool Discord, where a lot of neat people are hanging out.
And me.
And Kiki.